Welcome to Truman's Town Hall with your host, Matt Truman.
Hey everybody, this is Matt Truman. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for downloading, subscribing, liking, sharing. All that is important. If you want to leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify, please. It would help us out a lot. Soon this will be up on our audio podcast. I tried to get this going on the audio podcast over on the other computer, and it crapped the bed. So we're going live, and then I'll have this, and then I'll upload it soon enough over on the audio podcast. Folks, I hope everybody's doing good tonight. I'm doing pretty good. It's almost midnight, and I'm just now getting around to getting this up. I've had a couple of delays in all of this. So bear with me as we go through the news and the views that I have for you tonight. The title of this is, Are we living in a mad world? Because I think we are. I think we're living in a mad, mad world. There was a song, I believe Tears for Fears did it, and then REM did it, and both of them were hits. But anywho, I'm going to start off by playing a video, if you don't mind, a video of myself. And this was myself outside the Dark County Right to Life building. And in this video, I say right for life, but it was right to life. Anyway, we got this pulled up. I'm going to play this and let y'all watch it. What happened? County Right for Life. If you want to stop up at the Dark County Right to Life, they're here between 4 and 7, and tonight, tomorrow, I believe as well. You can call up here and ask when they're available. But they have the signs. They have these magnets for your vehicle. There's even little magnets. I don't know. Right there. You can have a little bumper sticker if you want. And if you want a sign and you're in Huber Heights or Beaver Creek or Springfield in the Dayton area, let me know. I'll come bring you a sign until we find a hub in Huber Heights. If you know anybody who wants to house a bunch of signs and stuff up until the election to help hand them out with literature, let me know and I'll hook them up and let them know. So anyway, vote no. November 7th. I am anyway. Talk to you later. If you watch any of the broadcasts, a lot of times I start talking and I still have myself on mute. I'm a total idiot. So that was a video of myself going up to the Dark County Right for Life, Right to Life. One of those, right? Right to Life. I went up there and I got a ton of signs. I'm just about out of signs. And I haven't even put out the signs in my neighborhood yet. Once I do that, I'll be out of signs. I'll have to go back up and get more. If you want a sign and you're in Ohio, near the Dayton area, reach out. I will get you a sign for the no vote on issue 1. Issue 1, man. I've done many podcasts on this. Go back and check them out. If it says Ohio issue 1, I'm talking about the ballot language and how it breaks down. So I hope you go back and check that out. But there's another video that I saw today that goes way beyond what I can explain. It's so, they break it down Barney style, so easy to view. And I'm going to play that for you real quick. And I hope you enjoy it.
What is Ohio Issue 1 and what does it mean?
Issue 1 is a constitutional amendment, which means it will be added to the highest level of law in the state of Ohio. All forms of government, including the Ohio legislature and the Ohio courts, must conform to the words of the Constitution.
So what is the language Ohio voters are being asked to approve?
Every word in a constitutional amendment matters. When the provisions of this measure are challenged, the courts will presume that the people of Ohio meant every word on the page. If definitions are lacking or certain clauses are left intentionally vague, the courts will presume the amendment was open for interpretation. What other choice will they have? Many people have reviewed this language and have come away with more questions than answers. Here are just a few.
What is the new right being created and placed in the Constitution? Because the actual words state every individual has a right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions.
Well, the new right is actually a series of rights called reproductive decisions. If this amendment were just about the right to abortion, it could have been written that way. But the words right to an abortion never appear.
How many rights are there in this amendment?
5 rights are listed: contraception, fertility treatment, continuing one's own pregnancy, miscarriage care, and abortion, which is last on the list.
Are there more rights than the ones listed here?
Since the language is insistent that the list is not limited to these 5 decisions or rights, what will stop a court from adding more items under this new human right? How many reproductive decisions are there? And who will decide what others exist? Perhaps not today, but in the future. Is cloning a reproductive decision? Are gender selection abortions a reproductive decision? Are gender-altering surgeries reproductive decisions?
What about children?
This amendment only talks about individuals. There is no protection for children in any of the language. Whatever benefits are available to every individual are also available for children, who legally are individuals.
Is there a provision made for parental rights?
No, parents are not mentioned in this amendment at all.
Can the Ohio legislature modify or regulate this language?
No. The state is prohibited from interfering in any way with an individual's exercise of the right to reproductive decisions, or interfering with any person or entity that assists an individual exercising any of the 5 rights on the list.
Is there some form of exception?
There is. It reads this way: unless the state demonstrates that it is using the least restrictive means to advance an individual's health in accordance with widely accepted and evidence-based standards of care.
What does that sentence even mean?
Great question. It looks like that's what a court will have to decide, because there is no further definition or explanation given.
Time out. Ohio has lots of existing laws on the books regarding abortion, parental consent, and the protection of minors. What happens to these laws?
That is true. And all of those laws are statutes. A new right placed in the Constitution calls all of those laws into question. Every one of them is subject to review based on the new right of reproductive decisions.
Will abortion be legal throughout all 9 months of pregnancy?
The amendment does not use those exact words, but states only that abortion may be prohibited after fetal viability. Note, the law does not read that abortion shall be prohibited after fetal viability, so it may or may not be prohibited.
Who decides on the viability of an unborn child?
The definition of viability is left solely in the hands of the physician treating the pregnant individual. If that physician decides aborting a viable human child is necessary to protect the patient's life or health, no one can prohibit the procedure.
What are the rules on determining viability?
Fetal viability means the point in a pregnancy when, in the professional judgment of the treating physician, the fetus has a significant likelihood of survival outside the uterus with reasonable measures.
What are reasonable measures? How are they defined?
They are not defined. This is to be determined by the treating physician alone on a case-by-case basis.
What is the definition of life or health of the patient?
No definition is given. It is solely the discretion of the treating physician. No one can challenge that decision.
Does this write abortion providers like Planned Parenthood into the Ohio Constitution?
Not by name, but Planned Parenthood or any other abortion provider can claim exclusive legal authority to define viability and avoid any form of liability for terminating the lives of viable children. The legislature may not pass a statute regulating viability because this amendment prohibits any such interference.
Will this language be challenged before the Ohio Supreme Court?
Regardless of how many challenges are brought, The Ohio Supreme Court is obligated by law to abide by the state constitution as approved by the voters of the state. They cannot unwrite what is written. Courts have been known to fill in the blanks, however. The court is obligated to protect and uphold every word of this language, no matter how poorly written or defined.
Who wrote this amendment creating the right to unlimited reproductive decisions?
No one has claimed authorship over this language. A group of Ohioans submitted the petition language to the state. Requests to the lawyer representing these petitioners regarding the authorship of the amendment have not been answered to date.
Believe it or not, there are more questions than these regarding what these words will mean for the people of Ohio for generations to come. You can read the entire amendment at seethelanguage.com.
All right, folks. That was a very informative video. I thought it was. It was sent to me by Donna Ping from the Ohio Election Forum. And I wanted to share that with everybody because I've been talking about this Ohio Issue 1 for a long time, months, on the podcast and elsewhere. And that video really breaks it down Barney style, where everyone can understand what this bill is going to do. So there's that. There's that. Issue 1, I am voting no. However, this may throw my conservative friends off. This may throw my Christian brothers off, sisters. May throw y'all off on this one. But I'm voting yes on issue 2. Now, I come on my podcast, and I do a couple different ones. But on my podcast, I'm free to say whatever I want, and I'm going to say what I want. And if people don't like it, that's on them. But I'm voting yes on issue 2, the legalization of recreational marijuana. Why is that? Well, let's watch another video to help explain why I'm going to vote yes on issue 2. And I'm going to bring it up. It's someone you probably already know. Jesse the Body Ventura had this to say.
But I want to tell you 2 stories why I'm so passionate about cannabis and hemp, and I please want you to listen to them. First story is this. Cannabis saved my life. Let me sink that in. Not me personally, but the 38th First Lady of Minnesota. And if I get choked up a little, bear with me. It was about 10 years ago. First Lady Terry Ventura started suffering from late-stage seizures, late-in-life seizures. She was seizing 2 to 3 times a week. And these were the type of seizures where you can't do anything but comfort the person, make sure they're breathing, make sure they're not swallowing their tongue, everything like that. Our life was over. We went to the doctors. They put her on 4 different seizure medicines. First 1 did not work. First 2 did not work. Third one did not work. Fourth one did not work. All had bad side effects. In desperation, we broke the law. We drove to Colorado. I have friends there that I met in my home in Mexico. And when we got there, my wife seized in the hotel the night before we got there. When we arrived there, our friends went in, they had the ability, they bought the cannabis, 3 drops under the tongue, right? My wife took the first 3 drops under the tongue and has not had a seizure since. None. Marijuana cannabis stopped the seizures. Not our medicine. Now what did we face? I had to break the law. My friends had to send it to me in Minnesota. Well, I kind of took the attitude of Dirty Harry Callahan when I said, well, then the law's wrong because I'm putting my wife ahead of Minnesota law. And I'll admit that today. I did. So we got our what we needed. Minnesota finally legalized, quote, medical. My wife qualified immediately, got it. But you know what the story is then? Because we're so restrictive, and that's what you're here to change today, hopefully, because it's so restrictive, it costs me $600 a month to keep my wife seizure free. Insurance won't pay for it. Nobody will pay for what works. They'll pay for what don't work, but they won't pay for what worked. And today, my wife, it's now, because you've expanded, it's down to $300 a month now. If it was Colorado, it would be $50 a month. Why? Because in spirit of true capitalism, when you get more out there, it drives prices down. That's what capitalism's supposed to do, drive prices down. The way you're set up today, you got a monopoly in Minnesota. I don't know who's providing whatever, but if you open up the doors, capitalism will take hold.
All right. So that was the former governor of Minnesota, the former wrestler, Jesse the Body Ventura. I think everybody remembers him. He's been on all kinds of podcasts. The funniest podcast I think he was on was Theo Vaughn. Check that out. Anyway, yes, I'm voting yes on issue 2, recreational marijuana here in the state of Ohio. And it's simple. There's a lot of soldiers I know that have PTSD, whatever you want to call it. Post-traumatic stress disorder, whatever you feel like you need to call it, okay. But marijuana has helped those soldiers. And obviously it helped Mr. Ventura's wife with seizures. There's a number of illnesses that right now, if you go and get a medical marijuana card here in the state of Ohio, which you can, there's a number of illnesses that you can use to get your card. You can't own a gun after that with this medical marijuana bill we have now. So with recreational marijuana, perhaps you can, because you can have a 6-pack, 12-pack, 24-pack of beer and still own a gun, but you can't have a joint or a gummy bear or whatever they infuse marijuana in today and have a gun. That makes no sense. Anyway. Okay, let's look at some other stories. We talked about issue 1. We talked about issue 2. I'm going to look at some other stories that I've come across. This one's rather interesting. The world departed from organized religion. This is out of Axios, which is, I believe, a far left organization. So they're already starting to talk about how religion is disappearing. Let's read some of this. There's a global fast-growing population of people without a religion. That's according to new AP NORC poll. Why it matters. Religion has long been a powerful force in society, touching politics, art, and daily life. The rise of non-believers and people who, with no religion affiliation, is diminishing its influence by the numbers. 3 in 10 U.S. adults said they had no religious affiliation. Right there, folks, I question things. Look around you. I mean, I point this finger as soon as I point my hand, and I talk a lot with my hands. All right. These are tools. They could be a fighting tool. They could be, grabbing this microphone tool, grabbing this cell phone tool, whatever. These are tools. This mouth speaks. Inside, all this stuff is planned. You can't look around and say there's no God. I don't understand agnostics or atheists. You look around, there is a God. And he's judging each and every one of us day by day. Hopefully, I do what's right and I end up in heaven. I hope. I pray every day. I think I pray every day. I better pray every day, doggone it. Anyway, let us keep moving on. So, religion, is it disappearing? Maybe religion is, but the fact that we have a creator is not. We have a creator, something, someone, a God, the God created us. And I believe that God sent down Jesus Christ. I'm a Christian. What can I say? All right. I'm going to play a wild story, right? Because in during Truman's Town Hall, we like to play different stories. This is Greg Reese. Greg Reese I find fascinating. I don't believe everything Greg Reese talks about, but I find him super fascinating, well documented. So let's bring up a Greg Reese story, if you mind. There was a time we did, I believe, 7 episodes of Aliens and Angels. Go back, if you're on YouTube or Rumble, go back and check those out, or Twitter even. Go back and check those out. Aliens and Angels. Brett Ward, he's a pastor and a former police investigator. He is a litany of information when it comes to secret societies, the occult, and all of that jazz, and aliens and the Bible. He's a bright dude, and I hope to do another episode of that soon, but we'll see. Brett's stepping out for a minute. So let me bring up Greg Reese and his report.
Once you start waking up from the hypnotic trance of the official lie, the word "they" is often used to lay blame on the perpetrators. This is usually followed by the question, who are they? According to ancient history, religion, mythology, and occult tradition, they are not human, and they have been manipulating humanity from the shadows for millennia. The Gods of Eden by William Bramley does an excellent job of tracing this back through all of recorded history. But let's just start from the late 19th century. Just over a century ago, it was known that giants with red hair and double rows of teeth once inhabited America. These 9-foot-tall giants were written about casually in 1874 by Abraham Lincoln. A few years later, the Smithsonian Institute began confiscating giant mummies and skeletons by the thousands. In 1886, the exclusive Jekyll Island Club was founded and built upon an ancient burial site of the Timucua tribe, who were said to be giants. In 1910, the Federal Reserve banking conspiracy was hatched on Jekyll Island between the Rothschild banking dynasty and the Rockefeller family, whose cabin there was known as Mound Cottage and said to have been built upon a sacrificial altar. These powerful families worked together to hide the truth of our mysterious past, and they built a modern society with poison to keep us dumb and lies to keep us confused. The Rothschild dynasty and the Federal Reserve banking system funded all sides of the First and Second World Wars, which paved the way for the creation of the United Nations in 1945. Funded by the Rockefellers, the UN was the beginning of today's de facto world government. The Nuremberg trials resulted with only 12 sentenced to death and 7 sent to prison. The majority were allowed to professionally continue their criminal activities. Nazis who were tried for medical experiments involving cruelty and murder were later brought into Big Pharma through Operation Paperclip, and an entire team of Nazi rocket scientists were brought in to start NASA. While the Nuremberg trials may have been mostly theater, they had their revelations. it was revealed that the Nazi eugenics program stemmed from organizations in America funded by the Rockefeller Foundation and its offshoots. And it was revealed that many high-ranking Nazis believed they were in contact with an alien race known as the Aryans, the same mythical race that allegedly created Hinduism as it is known today. While many Hindu scholars dismissed the claim, the Nazis believed it. It is why they adopted the popular Hindu swastika. They also studied the Vedas, and their most classified project, the Bell, had the same design as the Vimana spacecraft described in these ancient texts. In 1971, a young Klaus Schwab, son of a Nazi nuclear scientist, was placed as the head of what is now known as the World Economic Forum by his mentor, Henry Kissinger. In 1974, Rockefeller protege Henry Kissinger wrote National Security Memorandum 200 for the United Nations. This is popularly known as the Kissinger Report and is one of the foundational documents of the depopulation agenda unfolding today, with Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum acting as the tip of the spear. And so who are they? Several will say it's the Rothschild family, but they seem to work for the crown. Others argue that the Vatican holds more sway. Many people insist it's the Jesuits, and some swear it's the Jews. According to occult records, a character named Sanat Kumara rules over the world from inside the earth, along with a group known as the Great White Brotherhood, 7 in total. Helena Blavatsky says these 7 Kumaras are the same as the 7 Dhyanis, the 7 archangels, and the 7 Elohim, the 7 representing the 7 sisters, also known as the Pleiades star cluster. NASA, which was started by Nazis, Freemasons, and Satanists, has been obsessed with both Pleiades and Orion ever since the Apollo moon missions. According to hundreds of alien abductees, that is where most aliens claim to be from. 2 different factions, one to help liberate humanity and the other to enslave us. It is the oldest story on Earth, good versus evil, the darkness and the light, the white hats and the black hats. It is a struggle within each one of us and is unfolding in the world around us for all to see. A more beneficial inquiry might be, who am I? But either way, do not be surprised if the fake alien invasion features real aliens. Reporting for InfoWars, this is Greg Reese.
I did it again. I'm terrible with the mute button. I don't know why. That was Greg Reese from InfoWars. Man, does he have some interesting videos. If you don't watch Greg Reese, it's on band.video. Scroll down to Greg Reese. His videos are interesting. You don't have to agree with them because I don't agree with all of them. But man, they're interesting. They're fun. It's a fun video. All right. So more news. Let's get on to something else. The presidential election is in full swing. We've seen debates, right? 2 debates. I didn't watch the last one. Forgive me. Trump's winning on the Republican side. So I watched the first one. Vivek Ramaswamy definitely crushed it on that one. Chris Christie's just reaching, trying to grab a hold of political whatever. Who knows what he's trying to grab a hold of. But I'm going to bring this story up. It is an exclusive of RFK Jr. And he's talking. This is from Politics, the Daily Caller. RFK Jr. to speak at CPAC. What? RFK Jr.'s at CPAC. Well, that's good. He needs to get out there. He really needs to run as an independent because Biden's never going to debate RFK. Never. And the guy is a brilliant person. He's a good lawyer. He was raised by a phenomenal father, came from a good family, right? Good Catholic family. Presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Vivek Ramaswamy will speak at the Conservative Political Action Conference set to begin October 18th, according to a press release obtained exclusively by the Daily Caller. The newly announced speakers will join other prominent conservative figures such as Chris Rudy, CEO of Newsmax, Republican Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, which you know, if you've been paying attention, folks, he was just on trial for, they were trying to kick him out, and he won. He was acquitted on all 16 charges. And soon to be Republican Arizona Senate candidate Kari Lake. Kari Lake, I believe, folks, that Kari Lake is going to be the next vice president of the United States. I believe it. I think Donald J. Trump is going to bring in Kari Lake. Who else would he bring in? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, but I think Kari Lake is going to be Donald Trump's running mate when he wins the Republican nomination for president. Okay. Someone I find very interesting is Victor David Hanson. My middle name is Victor. It's my grandfather's name. It's my father's name. It's my name. It's my son's name. Victor is a very important name to me. But Victor David Hanson is a bit smarter than all of us combined. I don't know. My son's pretty darn brilliant. Seriously, kid's bright. He has conversations with I'll tell you a little story real quick before I go into this video. My son, we were out at a site. It was an old Indian burial ground. And my son was talking with some guy who was the curator over this site. It's here in Central Ohio. I'm trying to think of the name. It wasn't the Serpent Mound. It was a different mound site here in Ohio. Anyway, they were talking, and my son is 12 years old, and he was holding a conversation with a guy probably 65 years old, studying this stuff forever. My son's that brilliant. Anyway, I'm going to pull up this video of Tucker Carlson talking to Victor David Hanson. Sorry about that story.
If you've ever wondered why it's taken you so long to figure out what's happening now in American politics, don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. It's hard for most Americans to comprehend the total dishonesty of American liberalism. Virtually nothing the liberal says is true. And the lies are not ordinary lies. The lies are so brazen, so aggressive and unending that it's difficult for a normal person to understand what's happening. 30 years ago, for example, liberals began to lecture us, softly at first and then in an increasingly high volume, about tolerance. How could you have known then that they planned, in fact, to usher in the most intolerant age in American history? They've done that now, but few people saw it coming. We shouldn't make the same mistake again. Liberals are now telling us they plan to protect American democracy, and that's the clearest possible sign that they intend to end it. 13 months from this week, the United States will hold a national election. In a democracy, citizens can vote for the candidate of their choice. That's not just a feature, it's the defining fact of the electoral system. The people rule. They can send anyone they want to Washington because they're in charge. But this year, in the name of protecting democracy, liberals have decided to strip Donald Trump's name from the ballot in states across the country. Trump is the front runner in the presidential race. He's currently beating Joe Biden in the polls. Yet liberals have decided that you should not be allowed to elect him president. That's not democracy. It's the opposite. It's totalitarianism. Just this morning, Donald Trump appeared in court in New York in a civil case brought by the state's attorney general that was designed explicitly to keep him out of the White House. That case is part of a larger legal barrage against Trump that so far includes a total of 91 felony counts, every one of them politically motivated. But today's civil case is especially absurd. In fact, it's hard to overstate its ridiculousness. In sum, Trump stands accused of inflating the value of collateral used to secure loans that he has already paid back with interest. In other words, there is no injured party in this case. The biggest banks in the world assessed the risk and they made a profit, as they almost always do. Not a single person was defrauded. For this non-crime, Trump and his children are in the process of losing their homes and their businesses. Here's MSNBC's live coverage of the hearing today. And as you watch, pay special attention to the judge in the case, Arthur Engoron.
And there you see President Trump, the former president, I should say, next to his attorney, and that's Chris Kise, who we expect to make the opening statements here. And then this, Judge Engoron, I guess, is Judge Engoron.
There he is, the judge, mugging like he's on stage in a middle school play, grinning, preening for the camera. Arthur Engoron is thrilled to be on MSNBC. It's nauseating. This is not a legal proceeding. This is a grotesque parody of the system that our forefathers created, the fairest in the world, that in the years since has been seized by power worshipers like Arthur Engoron. This is a dangerous moment. Without a legitimate legal system, people will no longer follow the law and the country will collapse. This is not about Trump. This is about preserving the United States of America. But Trump is at the center of the story. And so today, for an overview of what exactly the strategy to prevent Trump from running for president and to end our current system, we turn to Victor Davis Hanson, who joins us now. Professor, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Tucker.
Before we get into the details of the legal assault on Trump, which in my view isn't really about Trump, tell us what you think is at stake here. What's the overview?
Well, I think they've come to the conclusion that Trump represented an existential threat, and by association, half the country did to their vision of what they want to transform us into. And so they feel that any means necessary are justified by their noble spiritual ends. And therefore, they call it critical legal theory. Just essentially, Tucker says, there's rules against stealing only because rich people don't steal, and therefore it's okay to steal. And modern monetary theory says print as much money, and eventually rich people will have to pay higher taxes or have their 401ks appropriated. Same thing with the border. Short term, everybody's mad at the border, but in dark rooms, they're saying to each other, in 10 years, everybody's going to appreciate what we did. We brought in 10 to 15 million new constituents. So, and I guess to put it all together, they feel that they're at a stage now where their agenda does not appeal to 51% of the people, and they either have to bring in new constituencies or change the system, the entire system of which we are acculturated to retain power. And that's what they're willing to do. And there's no such thing anymore as theft or lies or any of these things, because they're just constructs, and they're just anything that's useful to gain power is considered legitimate, and anything that's not useful is illegitimate. And that's how they define morality. And I think we're very naive, Tucker. We don't realize that we're in the middle of a revolution. We think that we're still playing within the same sidelines or parameters, and it's not. Everything's under negotiation, whether it's the Senate filibuster, the Electoral College, new states coming in, the size of the Supreme Court, voting IDs, the genders, the foundational data of the United States, pronoun usage, from the trivial to the existential.
we're in the middle of a cultural, economic, political revolution. And I think we got to wake up.
I mean, I suppose the danger is that if the average person decides that the system is illegitimate, it's not fair, it doesn't have any meaning beyond the political desires of the people administering it, then what prevents the average person from resorting to violence? In other words, if you have no power, if your vote means nothing, if the system is BS, then why don't you take up arms? Seriously.
Well, two things I think have precluded that so far. One is, I call it the monastery of the mind. A lot of people just say, you know what, I'm checking out. I don't want to watch the Oscars. I don't even know what the Tonys or Emmys are. I don't watch the NBA. I have nothing to do with Hollywood movies. I've just created my own reality. And the other is, under our federalist system, we're having millions of people. This is the greatest exodus diaspora we've ever seen in our history, where people are fleeing these blue states and blue cities to red states, and they feel that I'm going to recreate America as I once understood it without having anything to do. And so far, that's kept us sort of viable. But for them, that's not enough. It's never enough to have 2 million illegal entrants or 3 million. They got to have 8 or 9 or 10. It's not enough that Joe Biden is corrupt. It's not enough that he's non compos mentis. It's not enough that his agenda doesn't make sense. You've got to accept more and more of him. And I think they keep pushing the envelope, and these safety valves that I just mentioned, I don't know if they're going to be enough already. But right now, I think there's one last effort on the part of conservatives. They're going to say, you know what, we're going to speak up as we've never spoken up before. We're going to go after Target. We're going to go after Disney. We're going to say that we're going to go after the 3-gender movement, and we're going to try to win this election. We're going to try to win the House. We're going to try to win the representative. We just have to unite behind, and we'll see if that works. I'm really afraid. Everybody says democracy's in danger, but I think if they feel that they have the majority of the people, and I think the majority of the people are against this progressive Jacobin agenda, and they still can't find power, then we're going to be in new territory. We're in new territory now. And so there are legitimate efforts to rectify that and stop this madness. And let's see what happens in 2024. But I don't think it works anymore just to migrate to a red state or to drop out of the popular culture. You've got to get control of the political apparatus of the country through elections. And your worry is legitimate. If you can't do it through fair elections, then what do you do? So I think this election, I know everybody says that each election is paramount, but this one is very important because we're in the middle of a revolution, and it's our only avenue to a counter-revolution to return to normality.
What would you say to the people who stopped paying their cable bill and moved to Florida and feel like everything's fine because their neighborhood is fine? Why is that a bad strategy, dropping out and moving?
Because they can find you. And by that, I mean, Florida or Tennessee or living in Texas is a great advantage than living in California or Michigan or Oregon or Washington or Maryland. But eventually, the federal government is not satisfied to leave you alone. And so when you go on your Google search, it will be calibrated by an algorithm to make sure that you have results that don't represent reality. And we're in a federal system where we have $33 trillion in debt, and there's only 3 ways to get out of it. You either have to inflate all of our currency, which we're trying to do, I suppose, or we're going to have to appropriate capital, which they've talked about, giving credit to Social Security years by taking 401k money, or you're going to have to renounce the debt, and that's going to affect all of us. And I don't need to mention that a lot of this crime is going across state lines, and you can be in red state Texas, and the federal government can say you can't protect the Texas border, or maybe it can redefine the American border as the border with Oklahoma and tell it Texas, you're not sending your illegals northward, but you're not going to be able to stop them coming into your state because we've targeted you for radical demographic change. So it's a stopgap sanctuary, but it shouldn't lull us into the idea that it's a solution. The solution is to take back the Congress, to ensure the Supreme Court is a traditional Supreme Court, and to win the presidency. But unfortunately, the Republican Party, which we all look to, I don't look to it very much anymore, has lost 7 out of the last 8 popular votes, hasn't won 51% since George H.W. Bush did it by bringing in Lee Atwater in 1988. And we decided we don't want to ever win that way again. It was too ugly, they thought. So I guess the idea in the national level is to win, to lose nobly and never to win ugly. But we've got to change that attitude, because we're dealing with people that are not democratic liberals in the way that we used to define them as Bill Clinton or Harry Truman or JFK. This is a new generation of, as I said, Jacobins, and they believe that any means necessary are justified morally to achieve their morally superior aims.
What happens if Democrats win the presidency in 2024?
If they win the presidency, that means they'll keep the Senate and they'll probably take back the House. And then I would expect that we would see another 10 or 15 million illegal immigrants come across the border, and there would be efforts to confine those immigrants from going to northern cities. They would stop them somehow. I would assume that we would probably have advisors in Ukraine, and that would be charitable. I think people really do want to intervene in Ukraine with U.S. manpower. I would assume that what we see in the big cities crime-wise would extend, but it would also extend in the civil sphere, as we see with Donald Trump. That lawsuit that you mentioned is very important, Tucker, because it shows you that critical legal theory is not happy just to let people ransack, smash and grab, carjacking without consequences. They really do want to go after private capital in the civil sector, and they will start filing lawsuits as you wouldn't believe. And I think we'd also expect that the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ would have a referendum. I guess they would think the election was a referendum on them, and they're free to do what they have been doing, but at an accelerated rate. So I think it would be a disaster. And I think racial relations would get a lot worse as well. You know, they're getting bad now once we gave up the idea of ecumenicalism and turned to racial essentialism, is what the Democratic Party has forced down everybody's throat. So it's going to be scary if they win, because that means they'll probably take the House and the Congress, the entire Congress, and there won't be any redress of grievances. I don't see it. But I don't think they will, because they don't have any popular support. Every single one of Joe Biden's issues, economy, crime, energy, foreign policy, the border, he's polling 30 or 40%. And the only way they're retaining power is through the legal system and the administrative state and our institutions, media, entertainment, sports, education, K through 12, universities. And it's kind of an artificial way of getting power without popular consent. That's why I think you were right on when you said they don't believe in democracy. In fact, op-ed writers in the New York Times will say that now, that democracy is a flawed idea, because it doesn't any longer ensure the result that they have to have. Like good Bolsheviks or good Jacobins, they eventually always turn on elections. They don't want them. And so we'll see. It's going to be a very explosive. I hope everybody can keep their head, because I think the next 12 to 18 months are going to be the most explosive in our history since the Great Depression.
Do you think Trump is leading now? What do you think would happen if 11 months from now Trump were still leading?
Yeah, well, we're on chartered. We have no idea about this election, Tucker, because first of all, we've never had a president running against an ex-president, number one. Number two, we've never had an incumbent president that is utterly corrupt like Joe Biden and has lost all of his or most of his cognitive facilities and is very unpopular. And yet we've never had a challenger who has been the victim of lawfare and is facing 91 indictments. And every time people say they wouldn't dare do this. Fani Willis wouldn't dare. Letitia James is just an absurd prosecutor. She wouldn't dare. Alvin Bragg is a buffoon. He wouldn't dare. Jack Smith is a partisan. Every time people say that, they do. And so I don't know if there's a strategy to keep Donald Trump either out of a gag order or out of confinement at Mar-a-Lago or out of jail. So you can see where we're headed to, where Joe Biden isn't really a viable president anymore. He's a construct. He's being used by the hard left, by the Obamas and the Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders squad wing of the Democratic Party. And it's getting to the point of caricature. So you put all of those things together and add in a Kamala Harris that frightens everybody, because we've never had such an incompetent vice president, I think, and one so unfit to be president. And everything, all bets are off. It's like putting a group, all sorts of ingredients of explosive into a kind of device, and it's going to blow up, I think, somehow. But I don't think we can predict what's going to happen. It's just too volatile. I think the left feels that they want to push the envelope. They want to take the leading Republican candidate and they want to create charges against him, which they know they would have never lodged had he just said, I don't want to run for president. They would have let him alone. So these are patently political, and they want to destroy him psychologically, financially, and of course, politically. And they think they can get away with it without a pushback, and we'll see. And so I think the other candidates are going to be, I don't know what their line should be, Tucker, but I think it should be, if you want to vote for me, I am going to be viable, and I'm going to make sure that they never do to Donald Trump what they're doing now, and I'm in a better position to help Trump than he is. That's the only, I think, legitimate argument to make, that this involves everybody. And if you're going to run for president and you feel that you embrace the MAGA agenda, you should say that I will not be in jail. I won't be exposed as to the same degree. And if I can survive, I will change the system and make sure Donald Trump is exonerated and no one else has to face this. But otherwise, it's going to be a very complex, bizarre, baffling period. I don't think the founders had, this is their worst nightmare, 2023-24.
I don't even think you'd have to support Trump's agenda or Trump the man to see this as an assault on a centuries-old system that's worked better than any other. And I wonder why almost nobody in Washington seems to see that or be willing to say it out loud.
Yeah, the only question I have about that is I don't know why they did not go to the same extremes. They did go to extremes against McCain and Romney, etc. But there was something about Trump, his personality, that was an affront to the bicoastal standard of, I don't know, what they thought was acceptable or desirable, or it was his agenda. When they looked at the particular MAGA agenda and they said, my God, we have sizable investments in China and they are our partner. They're not an existential threat. This is really scary. Or we have this idea of global ecumenicalism. We can't have a border anymore. And this guy wants to bring back a border. Or we have this idea that how we look or our race is essential, not incidental to who we are. And he would want to bring back this crazy melting pot and destroy the entire woke movement. So I think it did represent to them a DEFCON 1, and they said, we can't have this. And it would have been all right, Tucker, had he been a third party Ross Perot. They dealt with people like that in the past, and they'd already been able to handle them. But he won the Republican nomination, got elected, and now he wants to be back. And they just said, we're going to do everything possible, and we're going to even reject our prior democratic liberal heritage of, ACLU, free speech and transparency, and the church committee investing. All of that's off the table. We don't want to do any of that anymore. We're going to do anything necessary to destroy this guy's vision and the other candidates who share his vision. Because if we don't, we're going to go back to an America that we didn't like when it was there, we don't like now, and we sure as hell don't want it to be an America in the future like that.
I think even people who are skeptical of the claim that the last election was unfair or rigged have concluded that it was in fact unfair. and the federal agencies got involved in a partisan way. It was not a free and fair election. Given that that system is still in place, you think it's possible for a Republican or Trump specifically to get elected in 2024?
It's very difficult. What the left did was absolutely brilliant, Tucker. They seized on this Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, Kraken, Dominion voting machines as representative of all of the questions about the election, when most people said the election was lost on by the time we got to election day.
Yeah.
Because 70% of the voters had voted not on election day, and that never happened in American history. It was always 30% absentees, 70% in most states on election day. But they systematically used COVID as an excuse and went into about 9 states and changed the voting laws. And I mean by that the error rate for mail-in ballots dropped exponentially as the rejection rate did, as they were swarmed by them. And they were bragging about it. Mark Zuckerberg was bragging about spending $419 million to absorb the work of precinct workers in key states. Molly Ball, as you remember in that Time essay, just gushed about how they had outsmarted these stupid conservatives, and they had coordinated the Chamber of Commerce, the street people, Antifa, et cetera, to modulate the demonstrations and to suppress free speech. And, you know, when Twitter is being controlled by the FBI to the tune of $3 million being paid off for their own contractors to suppress streets, or Google is manipulating searches and ads and everything, that's what destroyed the viability of a fair election. It was done before election day, and we were all asleep, or some of us, I know you were yelling about it. I was trying to yell about it, but we couldn't get through to anybody that they would be that audacious or that successful. Nobody thought they were capable of that, and yet they were.
So why have Republicans in Washington done nothing meaningful to fix any of that?
I think the traditional answer to that is probably accurate, that there's a culture that is created, and it's kind of a lose nobly, avoid winning ugly, profit both financially and psychologically, the status quo, and they feel that their own constituents, some of the Republican constituents, are kind of out there and an embarrassment to the type of culture and environment that, you know, that they operate in Washington. And so the sense is, I'm not going to be too affected by the left-wing takeover, because I know I can make the necessary adjustments in a way that my constituents can't. And so I think there's sometimes in the case of somebody like Mitch McConnell, it can be overt, but in other cases, it's pretty clear as well. And that's been going on for a long time. And the problem we're having now is that you need leaders who are trying to tell people we are in a Jacobin takeover of this country, and the old get along at any cost does not work. And I don't think people want that disruption in their comfortable lives in Washington. I mean, if you say to somebody in the Republican establishment, we got to break up the FBI, you've got to take the headquarters and put it in Kansas City and farm out the divisions to other cabinet posts to prevent that concentration of really dangerous power. You've got to do something with the CIA. You've got to do something with the DOJ. We got to have massive legal reforms. I don't think they're up to that. I really don't. I don't think they're up to being trashed in the Washington Post or the New York Times, or not being invited to a particular guest spot on a network news, or being shunned by NPR and PBS. They're just not up to that, or having their books trashed by book reviewers on the left. They don't want that. There's a few that do, but until we get a lot of people who say, you know, you on the left culturally have nothing that I want, and so when you hate us and call me names and you lie about, I take that as a badge of honor. I don't try to provoke you. I want to get along with you, but you have no cultural influence over me anymore. And I'm going to be an advocate for returning to the country to the principles upon which it was founded. I think that's what.
There it is. I did not unmute again. If you want to watch the rest of that video, I played a majority of it, but if you want to watch the rest, check out Tucker Carlson on Twitter. Vote no on issue 1. Vote yes on issue 2 here in Ohio. And make sure you're registered to vote. I'm Matt Truman. This is Truman's Town Hall, and I'll see you next Friday. Yeah, next Friday.